Bonjour à tous et puis à tous ceux qui sont aussi en ligne. Donc c'est un talk.
Good morning, everyone. We'll be doing this presentation together, the two of us. We're talking about this project Espace Vert, a green space. It's an installation workshop that talks about the fragility of plants and colors. My name is Marc Chomaz. I am an artist and a physicist, and I work at the Polytechnique school, and I work in a research laboratory on the link between art and science. And I am in a PhD student, and I work on the relationship between people, plants, and the relationship between plant species. As part of this project, we've been trying to work like a photography lab on the preservation of plant colors, offering people the opportunity to work in certain conditions and to work on making colorants, dyes. So we try to let people become plants in a way for a few minutes. So this is just a slide to show you how complicated a plant is. This is a chloroplast. So you know that plants work through photosynthesis. That's the equation that you see down here. This is a chlorophyll that enables photosynthesis. It's very complicated in terms of biology. Even biologists don't really understand it very well. But basically, it takes water and carbon dioxide and produces sugar and oxygen, and that's what helps. That's what enables plants and us to live. And it's all based on the chloroplast, which is a directional combination of little structures that organize the photosynthesis. And in these little structures, the plants, let's say their vision, their way of that photosynthesis enables plants to have a certain vision, and the exposure to the sun produces signals and sugar. They also have other types of vision in the infrared range, and so that's how plants see. And up at the top, you have the spectrum of chlorophyll, which uses blue and red lights to create photosynthesis, and it doesn't do anything in the green zone. That's why the plants are green. And if you look just at the sugar production, then you get this, which was another project that the way that we imagine that we look at plants has to do with the signals that we see and that they see. So blue and red to create purple. So this is one project. The project that we're doing with Anouk, though, has to do with chlorophyll, which if you project blue or red light on it, it reacts, it oxidizes, it changes its state, and it loses its color. So if you want to preserve that chlorophyll, we have to go into a space that's green, like the plants. Like when you're drying flowers, you have to dry them in the dark, because otherwise they lose their color. Everyone is familiar with the red light that you in a photo lab. You have to go into that red light in order to not expose your paper, and this is the same thing, but in green. So here you have a couple of different spaces for these workshops. There are different formats. There's a short workshop for example, for the science festival for middle school students who created their colors and named them. And there's another one. There was also a festival in Bourges, and another one in a festival called Experimentation in Grenoble. And in those workshops, there are other longer versions where participants are invited to try and understand and experience the plants. For example, somebody said that they'd never noticed that in the grass there were lots of different species, and so we told the people to draw the plants, name them, identify them, using apps like PlantNet, and then to draw them on paper. The protocol is simplified because generally in a laboratory we use a product which is a cancerogenesis. So we use only ethanol for the public workshops so that it's not dangerous for the participants. And so we tell people to take the plants and name them, identify them, then crush them with a little bit of alcohol, and then that creates this dyes. So it's a way of creating a green laboratory and then coloring the drawings. Here you can see, for example, two types of drawings, one by Carlos and one that I did myself, which was conserved in black light, where you can see that the plants are green, whereas the plants are brown because the ink has oxidized and has evolved. So the idea is that the participants identify the colors that they make through a participatory chlorophyll ink color chart, and to name those colors because they make those colors. And then when you go into this color chart, the colors continue to evolve. There are a lot of artifacts that are produced in this workshop. For example, the filters that are used to extract the plants. And the participants are asked to name these filters and to identify the plants that were used with these filters and to date them so that we can see how they change over time. And there are also exchange sessions, for example, between Françoise, who has a doctorate in plant physiology, and Julia, who is a design student, and over that 1 hour period, we're able to talk about their relations with plants. And for example, Julia talked about her grandmother, who every year at Easter would give her a new plant, or would take her out and look for certain plants in the forest. And during that workshop, Julia drew Françoise, who took that drawing home, and they talked about the plants together. So if you want to see what this does, how these art gestures work, then it's up to us to move around in a environment, a plant environment. You also have to accept the fragility of these inks. None of these inks will be stable over time. The more we look at them, the more they're going to disappear. And then third, drawing plants with the ink that comes from the plant that's drawn. And the idea is that this creates a meeting platform. It creates different types of encounters because you move into this universe, the plant universe, but also a scientist universe, which is a threatened universe or an unstable universe. So this creates very unusual encounters.
Peut-être il y a un temps de questions. Nous, on vous voit mal parce qu'on a beaucoup de lumière dans les yeux.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce que quand vous avez mis dans le nuance,
when you put the colors in this ink chart, the color chart, you said that those colors are going to disappear? Do they all move towards the same color before they actually disappear, or are there frequencies or other elements that distinguish them and make them disappear differently? Well, they all disappear differently because they weren't produced at the same time. So there are inks that are maybe 2 years old, and another is just 1 year. So they evolve differently. Some of them, when people follow this protocol, they don't use the same amount of alcohol, even if we tell them how much to use. And so that also changes the nuance of these colors. And once the color chart is done, it's preserved, it's conserved in a black space, but they do evolve differently. The plants are not just made up of chlorophyll. Of course, there's also carotene and maltodextrin and other elements that don't necessarily break down in the same way. It's the same as the idea of having a dried plant collection. You protect those dried plants from the light. You don't look at it very often, and so it's this idea of impossible conservation in a world where we have to accept that things disappear.
Explanation very inspiring. So you've developed this kind of process with young experimenting groups. How do you see the next step of your research? What will you continue to do?
I try to respond you in English.
Ou en français.
Slowly.
Slowly in French, it's okay for you?
French is okay, but
my
friend is... okay.
Okay. Okay, je vais parler doucement en français.
So I'll speak slowly in French. In this particular case, there's a scientific aspect to these workshops, which is meant to work on chromatography, high precision chromatography, to see whether black light actually really preserves those colors, or whether the green light actually has an impact. So there are experiments that are done in the laboratory, or will be. And if we want to go even further, with the climate change, the color of the sky is going to change, and there are biological laboratories that we work with who are wondering how plants are going to respond to that change in the color of the sky. And in order to do that, you have to understand how that chloroplast is going to send a green retro signal to the DNA of the plants, so that the plants change forms. So if we want to look at the long-term aspect of this, there are these questions of response and adaptation to climate change. But once again, trying to enter into the plant's leaves, if you like, not instead of being in their shoes, we're in their leaves, but to understand how this type of research can have an implication, a biological meaning, where we have to become plants if we want to reintegrate the world like the plants will. Thank you for this presentation and for this project. I have a question concerning the black light that you mentioned, which could possibly preserve those plants, those colors, because in black light there's no color. Okay, I misspoke. We're not talking about black light, which is a ultraviolet light. I was talking about actually in the dark. So you can try and keep those works in the dark, but would there be a way of seeing them, looking at them every once in a while? Or you just look at them when you take them out to see how they're doing? Well, that was the proposals that was made at Experimenta, that green laboratory, where we told the participants that once they had colored their drawings, once they left the room, they were going to start, the drawings were going to start breaking down. For children, it's especially frustrating, because they don't see the color because the green is in green light, and so they open the door and they look at the color, but that alters the color. Because, of course, these are green drawings in a green light, so you can't see them. So this idea of it's like keeping a plant collection, a dried plant collection. But what's important also is the time that we spend together in these green spaces. So even at Experimenta, where everyone was running around from one booth to another, the people stopped at our booth because it was green, because the green was there, and it was attractive to people, and people, maybe it's because we have plant elements in ourselves, and so it's attractive to people. That's what I was thinking. Yes, when you go into a room where there's just one color, very often it's unpleasant. Maybe because we're used to seeing all of the colors. So you're saying that maybe the green is unusual. Well, our vision, this is one of our research subjects. In our research, we have the cones. You see the green, you see the color green, you don't see red. So you've got the rods that see about 90 nanometers, and in the cones you see 510 and 500 and some, and that's green. And so we know that the yellowish green gives a stronger signal than the green, and in red light you can't see very well because we are adapted to our planet, and our eyes, the rods and the cones are adapted to that. And so the more you spend time in these different colors, the more you adapt to your rods and your cones adapt to those colors, and so, for example, people who live in a green space have a much more refined differentiation in their perception of the color green, and then there are other artists who film things in black and white because they want us to forget those colors. So, thank you very much. That's very interesting. I have a strange question, but because you're talking about the light on Earth, but what about the blackness that you find in space, which is really sort of a kind of a black light, not the ultraviolet, but it's that darkness is really black.
Talk to the astronauts and say, look, maybe this light project could work in space, because there they have different conditions. Take it outside and see what happens.
Donc là, je pense la recherche aussi pour...
This research project regarding the response of plants to different colors involves also researchers who grow plants in different colored lights, looking at the entire spectrum to try to understand how different colored light can change the plant's growing rhythms. For example, to increase their growing rates, trying to understand what plants need. And plants do see in infrared light because they use that light to perceive the world that it's around them. For example, if there's a wall, if it's a plant that attaches to things, and it senses that there's a wall, then the plant knows to go and attach to that wall. We might imagine also ourselves as aliens on another planet. How would we imagine that we are anchored down? Even here, I know that here the Earth is far away because you can feel the metro underneath us. There are plants that where you put a plant over here and the plant moved. The plant moved around to try and find the rod where it could attach. In plants that grow in space, for example, try to move them to stand upright again in order to grow always in a sort of a straight line despite the lack of gravity. So it's interesting to see how plants react to these different things. Thank you very much for this presentation. You answered that question, but I was wondering about climate change and the change of colors. Do we know how those colors are going to change, or what the change will be? Well, this laboratories in Barcelona who are working on this. We applied for a European project, but didn't get it. But this laboratory in Barcelona is working on how to project, how to deduct the change in lights, in the color of the light, and the depending on the dust particles and the presence of stars. And they have been looking at nebulosity and content in CO2 and oxygen, and how that's going to change the quality of our light, and how plants are going to be forced to adapt. And of course, this is different as well from one zone to another on the planet, and how plants will be exposed to different luminosities, and how that's going to change it. So this is not our research project, but it is ongoing. The influence of forest fires is surprising. I went to California during forest fires, and it's really surprising to feel the sun on your skin, but not see the sun. And that's where I realized that dust stops the visible light, but doesn't stop the infrared light. So that's why you can feel the heat of the sun, but not see the sun. So it's a very strange light, and it's very perturbing. It's you have this. You perceive the sun through your skin and not by your eyes.
Merci à tout le monde.
Merci. Au revoir.